Hello and welcome to Political Brew. I'm Phil Hirschkorn. Our topics this week: the State of the Union, what President Trump said about Maine; the Trump and Maine Republicans' war on fraud; the Maine governor's race, introducing Bobby Charles; and the backlash against ICE and fears of fall election interference. My guests are Jason Levesque, a Republican, former three-term mayor of Auburn, and Emily Cain, a Democratic, former state senator and House Minority Leader, also former executive director of Emily's List, which supports pro-abortion rights Democratic women running for office. Thank you both for being here.
Glad to be here.
President Trump delivered his State of the Union address this week, the longest in history, clocking in at 1 hour and 47 minutes. Trump touted his economic policies, noting mortgage rates are lower, the stock market higher, tax reform, like eliminating the federal tax on tips and overtime, and tariffs. After the Supreme Court reined in his emergency authority to unilaterally impose tariffs, as he's done for the past year, Trump defended a new 15% global tariff.
Congressional action will not be necessary. It's already time-tested and approved. And as time goes by, I believe the tariffs paid for by foreign countries will, like in the past, substantially replace the modern-day system of income tax.
Absent from his audience, 3/4 of Maine's congressional delegation. Congresswoman Shelley Pingree opted to attend a People's State of the Union rally on the National Mall. Senator Angus King skipped it because, quote, the president has shown no respect for the principles upon which this country is based, the constitutional separation of powers, the rule of law, the rights guaranteed to every person under the Constitution. I cannot in good conscience participate in a function with the president at its center. Congressman Jared Golden told us, I've had my fill of pomp and circumstance, so I'll be watching at home. Only Senator Susan Collins, same party as Trump, attended the State of the Union. She said, as I have every year since I've been in the Senate, 30 for 30. So, Jason, is the State of the Union strong?
Yes, it is. I can say that unequivocally. I mean, it is a strong country. We look at it, we're experimenting, we're trying different things, we're breaking the mold, so to speak. That's going to upset a lot of people, especially those entrenched in the system, i.e. the 3 members of our delegation who failed to represent the state at the State of the Union. I got to tell you, Senator Collins, I mean, yeah, 30 for 30. She's never missed a vote. That is, and it should be the ideal for representation. Whether you like the individual in the executive branch or not, you're there, you're representing your constituents, regardless of what your own personal animosity might be towards that individual. So hats off to her. Really sad day for the rest of the 3/4 of the delegation. But again, we're strong. You look at America, you look at the stock market, you look at the economy, you look at the new innovative things that are happening, seeding retirement accounts for newborns, trying different things in order for everybody to participate in this economy, participate in the American dream. Those are all positives, and we got to keep that going.
Emily?
I listened to the whole thing. I was driving on Tuesday night, and in the middle of that, I got the news that Democrats won the special election in Lewiston. So it was like, okay, lots going on tonight on this Tuesday. But I listened to the whole thing, and for me, it was a real reminder that our president was a reality TV star. Right? There was a lot of gaslighting. There was a lot of things he didn't talk about. He didn't acknowledge the challenges of ICE in the past several weeks, the economic challenges people are facing. And I thought when I saw the news about the delegation, I laughed to myself and thought, I can't believe these 3 members have all agreed on something. I mean, when was the last time Senator King, Representative Pingree, and Representative Golden all landed in the same place on any issue? I have a hard time coming up with a list, but I know that for each of them, they had their own reason, which you articulated. I did listen to the whole thing. There was not much surprising for me in there. He was rambunctious, he was bombastic, he was not telling the truth all of the time, but this is what we know from him. This is not new. It is not news. And then I think we go back to work the next day.
I think those 3 probably been unified in, say, defending lobstermen. Maybe they all voted for Kamala Harris.
But when it comes to the president and his positions, right, we have seen a difference with each of them and their own approach. And the fact that they each decided to not go, I think reinforces the fact that what we saw on Tuesday night was more of a spectacle than a serious speech.
If you were in Congress as a Democrat, would you have skipped it?
I am a rule follower from way back. I probably would have gone myself just because I know myself, but I also love pomp and circumstance, so I think there's a little bit of all of it.
To push back on your rosy economic scenario and the president's, Despite the tariffs, we still have just as high a trade deficit as we did before that, something tariffs were supposed to address.
That's not exactly correct.
Well, that's from the Wall Street Journal. Factory construction grew under Biden, peaked in 24. It's tapered under Trump.
I should have probably had my notebook with all my counterpoints. I didn't realize it was going to be 2 against 1 today.
Well, not 2
but
against
let's
1.
talk about that. Don't keep on going.
Well, the third one that critics are talking about is jobs. Only 181,000 jobs created last year versus 1.5 million in 2024. So some indicators are up and some are down.
But those, you're talking about stats that were not revised. Okay, after the revisions, those numbers were way down back in 2024, and they've been going up in 2025. We're in the middle of a very big economic shift towards really building the middle class. That's going to take time. You're already starting to see foreign investment, which is not a lie, over $17 trillion in foreign investment back in the United States. That takes time to build those factories. Now, unfortunately, because of Maine's political climate right now, we're probably not going to see a lot of that growth here. It's going to be down south in more business-friendly, tax-friendly states. That's unfortunate. As a country as a whole, though, things are going to go up, but there will be some growing pains, if you would, until we get to that point.
You know, one thing in the speech that I found I shouldn't have been surprised by, but I was how much time the president spent talking about Joe Biden. You know, that election was now in 2024. Here we are in 2026. Last year, I would have expected more of that sort of look what I'm doing compared to that guy. But now the president's been in office for a full year, and yet here he was still dedicating a lot of minutes of that record long, setting speech to Joe Biden, and still in this sort of competitive space, right? I'm better than that guy. Look what I'm doing better than that guy. And I kind of wanted to say, look, like, we know you won the election in 16, you lost it in 20, but you won it in 24. Why are you still talking about Joe Biden? I don't know whether Joe Biden watched. You'd have to ask him.
Tell you what,
but I think it was
it
was a really interesting I was shocked at how much Joe Biden lives rent-free in Donald Trump's brain.
I can imagine. Look at all the mess he made, though. In 4 short years, he created an unbelievable disaster in this country. Yeah, he's still talking about Joe Biden. We're moving past that. We are.
You might be. The president was not moving past Joe Biden on Tuesday night.
I think he is moving past it, but it's going to take everybody to go and kind of roll in the same direction in order to really get through those really devastating 4 years under Biden.
We'll take a pause. We'll talk some more about President Trump and his war on fraud when we come back. The one time President Trump mentioned Maine in his State of the Union speech this week was when he talked about fraud.
There's been no more stunning example than Minnesota, where members of the Somali community have pillaged an estimated $19 billion from the American taxpayer. Oh, we have all the information. And in actuality, the number is much higher than that. And California, Massachusetts, Maine, and many other states are even worse.
Now, Maine care fraud couldn't be worse than $19 billion, which is almost 4 years of the whole state budget. But Trump might have been referring to a recent report from the U.S. Health Department alleging $46 million in improper payments related to autism services. Dr. Mehmet Oz, who oversees Medicare and Medicaid, has talked about that report. And Trump tapped Oz, and there you see him, Vice President J.D. Vance this week, to lead a war on fraud. Senator Collins told us we simply cannot afford to have Medicaid funding ripped off and diverted by scam artists and fraudsters. It's not fair to the law-abiding taxpayer and a massive dereliction of duty by those who are stewards of these funds. The state is due to respond next week to that federal inquiry. Governor Janet Mills recently denied there's been fraud, but said Maine has spent more on providers for kids with autism.
It is part of the Trump administration's effort to weaponize every department of federal government to oppose anybody who disagrees with him or anybody who stands up to him. We got nothing to hide. We're spending money, I think, for good reasons and good causes and people's needs.
In Augusta, legislative Republicans keep talking about that $46 million and the $1.7 million in alleged Maine care overbilling by the nonprofit Gateway Services founded by Somali immigrants.
That right there is why the federal government has to come and fix this mess, because the state of Maine has not done its job. It has not handled the money correctly. It has not administered its programs correctly. Fraud has run rampant.
Emily, is fraud rampant or exaggerated.
Look, if fraud is happening, we should get to the bottom of it and we should address it. I'm a former chair of the Government Oversight Committee. I take fraud seriously. And that's why I looked up the numbers on the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services. Fraud on their own published website under the Trump administration, they have it listed as between 5 and 6%. So that's a lot of money. We absolutely should talk about that. But let's not pretend that this isn't just another tactic to distract from the fact that Republicans right now have very little that's popular, have very little that's resonating with the American people. So fraud is their new favorite F word, right? It's fraud this, it's fraud that, it's F this, it's F that from them right now. They're spraying it on everything that they can to try to distract from the fact that they don't have a plan. They're afraid they're going to lose in November. And so this is the one thing they can do that they can try to make stick. I also want to point out that in Donald Trump's speech, the 4 states he mentioned are all states he lost, all states that are blue, and all states with governors he doesn't like. Is that a coincidence? I think not.
Jason?
It's almost like the Democrats' new favorite D word is deflection. Okay, you like that one?
Funny.
I just made
Oh,
that up on the
that's
fly. You're
cute.
welcome.
F word and a D word.
Yeah, well, I don't know if there's any
job.
other D words that are bad, but still.
I mean, I like the play.
Yeah, thanks. So you look at this. I mean, come on. Either the Democrats up in Augusta right now are either unable to root out fraud. It's there. It's not an if. We're past ifs at this point. It's there. And we know why it's there. It's because the Democrats have been propped up by this nonprofit industrial complex that goes and gets their members and your fellow members of the Democratic Party elected in order so they can get some quid pro quo, a little tit for tat. This is the flow that's been happening in Augusta, California, Massachusetts, Minnesota for years. So either they're unwilling or they're unable. Either one is bad. But those are the only 2 choices, very binary here. Either they don't want to root out fraud because they know that's how they can perpetuate their power and their power base, or they're just really incapable of finding out what fraud looks like, where it's at, and how to stop it. So yes, we need the federal government to come in. Unfortunately, the federal government has to come in and be the nanny to the inept, incapable, unwilling Democrats in Augusta.
With the Gateway example, 1.7 million, if I'm doing the math right, is 7% of the 23 million they were allocated over the last, or billed for in the last decade or so. You said earlier that HHS had a 5 or 6%.
Nationally, right? That was a national number.
You're saying that's acceptable or that's
no,
normal?
Of course not. I guess what I'm saying is, but you hear the Republicans talk about it, you'd think we're talking about most of the dollars. Right? And we're not. And I think it's really important, even when you look into the research on the federal site, they talk about how more than 3/4 of the fraud actually has to do with documentation that is incorrect. It's not malicious, right? So I agree. Let's go after malicious fraud. Let's make sure government works for people. Let's make sure it's working so people can get the services they need, so the dollars are getting where they're going. What I want to see from Republicans is less shouting and more ideas. Come to the table in the Government Oversight Committee. Come to the table with ideas about how we can do this better, and let's stop making it about rhetoric to target people indiscriminately.
I got to follow up with this. Okay, so you need Republicans to come and fix the mess the Democrats have
Let's
started,
work
because the
on it
Democrats
together.
work on it together. Can you guys take the lead? You're in the majority. Take the lead. You should have taken the lead years ago.
We'd love to do it with you so we can have balanced budgets, so we can do it in a bipartisan way.
So what would happen if the administration withheld Medicaid funding? Vice President Vance announced the administration would withhold $259 million in Medicaid funding for Minnesota. Yeah. We have a smaller piece of that pie, but what would happen if the administration did that to Maine?
Well, 1 of 2 things, really. I mean, A, there's going to be a lot of people that need Medicaid funding in order to survive. That's bad. But it might be the only way. It might be the only whip in order for Maine to finally get its house in order and stop this quid pro quo and this funding, this cycle of funding. I mean, how many members of the legislature of the Democratic side are actually sitting on boards or employees of these nonprofits that are enjoying the largesse of federal and state funding? A lot. Okay, I'm not going to name names, but we all know them. You've reported on them before. So things need to stop. I wish the Democrats would stop deflecting and actually say, yeah, there's a problem. We're going to work with you and fix this problem, because we have not done a good job in the past 8 years fixing this problem as a majority party. And as the chief executive of the state of Maine sitting in the Blaine House, it's ultimately her responsibility to make sure that her department heads are allocating this money effectively with minimal amounts of fraud. 7% is unacceptable, 5% is unacceptable.
Okay, we have to leave it there. I'm glad you mentioned the Blaine House, because when we come back, we're going to take a look at the Maine governor's race. A second Republican is qualified for the Maine gubernatorial primary in June. State Senator Jim Libby from York County. He's also a St. Thomas College professor. Submitted his petition with the 2,000 required signatures to the Secretary of State's office. Libby described one way he trimmed the state budget and help hospitals.
We have got to reduce the number of people that are on Maine Care. And the reason for that is when you have 400,000 people on Maine Care, that's almost a third of the population, right? And Maine Care is reimbursed at a low rate.
Pingree became the second Democrat to qualify for the gubernatorial ballot. The former State House Speaker and top aide to Governor Janet Mills saying voters have confidence in her.
I know how to stand up and actually get things done. And they also want a positive vision for Maine's future, somebody who can actually deliver for Maine people. And I'm ready to do that.
Democratic gubernatorial candidate Troy Jackson picked up the endorsement of Portland Mayor Mark Dion and 3 other city councilors. Dion said he wants a working person in the Blaine House, like the 5th-generation logger from Allagash.
When I think about being a Democrat, I think of the fact that it was always for working people. That's where it started. And when I entered politics 30-some-odd years ago, my father said, "Don't forget who you are."
Jackson, the former state Senate president, squared off this week in an hour-long debate in Auburn with Republican gubernatorial candidate Bobby Charles. Jackson had challenged Charles following comments Charles made that Jackson considered denigrating to Somali immigrants. They discussed immigration, crime, drugs, and affordability. Charles vowed to eliminate the state income tax in 4 years.
I will cut taxes in this state, property taxes and income taxes. I will get the drug traffickers out of this state within 24 months. I will bring good addiction services into this state, and I will put our schools back on track.
Now Bobby Charles wants to zero out income taxes. What's that going to do for law enforcement? What's that going to do for fire and rescue? What's that going to do for ambulance? What's that going to do for your property taxes across Maine? It's going to mean that you're going to go even further through the roof. That's not going to help everyday working class people. It's going to kill them.
Jason, Bobby Charles could be a formidable Republican nominee, yeah?
You know what? Kudos to Bobby Charles. He looked like an executive up on the podium. That was positive. But second, he's swinging big. And that's what we need in Maine. We need some big swings, whether it be from Bobby Charles or someone else. I will say there's 2 takeaways here. One, it wasn't about Bobby Charles. This is about Troy Jackson. He does not have the temperament to be governor. He does not have the temperament to run in a primary, let alone in a general election. And, you know, I think he's on his way out after his performance against Bobby Charles. Second, a little bit of advice for all the Democrats that are running for governor out there. He went absolutely to zero and didn't really address the problem. So if Democrats, and maybe Hannah will pick this up, and if she does, she owes me something, but you just respond with yes. Taxes are a major economic burden to the taxpayers of Maine. Absolutely understand. We need to be working towards eliminating the income tax. It's an appropriate thing, but we also need to balance essential state services and make sure there's no negative ramifications. So let's work together in order to start meaningfully lower income taxes. That was Bobby Charles' really big point. Over 4 years, I want to get that down to zero. Awesome. Acknowledge it. Run with it, okay? Don't counter it with, oh no, it's going to be doomsday, blah, blah, blah. Look at all the other states that have zero income taxes, and you can't tell me New Hampshire's property taxes are significantly more than Maine's now.
Emily, we should remind everyone you're Hannah Pingree's campaign treasurer.
Yes.
But are Democrats worried about Bobby Charles? He's raised more money than anyone not named Bush in the Republican primary. He's good debater, it seems, and has a good resume. We should tell people who don't know him. He was an assistant U.S. Secretary of State. He was a White House staffer going back to the Reagan administration. He was a naval intelligence officer. What do you think?
I mean, in a word, are we worried? No. I mean, let's talk about what this was this week, right? This was an opportunity for 2 candidates looking to gain traction in their separate primaries by putting on a show, debating each other. Every candidate in the Democratic primary has made television reservations so far, except for Troy Jackson. He needs a splash, and here we are, talking about him on TV. You're showing clips of him talking about his values. Bobby Charles is somebody who, no matter how you slice it, and I get his resume, all of it, is in that primary seen as more fringe and less serious. They both needed this for their campaigns to try to pick up some momentum. We'll see whether it worked. We're talking about them, right? And so I think what you see in contrast to that with the first 2 candidates you profiled, with Jim Libby and with Hannah Pingree submitting their signatures, those are 2 candidates who have spent the last several months using signature gathering as an organizing tool to get their signatures in early, right? They're not due for several more weeks. And as we head into this weekend, the Democratic caucuses will be there, where I expect a lot of candidates will finish collecting their signatures. But again, this week to me was about Bobby Charles and Troy Jackson trying to make a splash, get your attention, and then now it's up to them to see if they can hold it.
The way Charles talks, it seems he's pretty aligned with Trump on a lot of the issues like immigration and crime. Is that a winning strategy for a Maine gubernatorial nominee?
I mean, time will tell. I think there's a lot of points, if you would, issues that are brought up during that debate and the very quiet gubernatorial debate so far, or contest, I should say. I don't know. It might be. I mean, if you look at pocketbook issues, which always resonate with voters, eliminating income tax, yeah. Hey, meaningfully lowering it down to half of what it is, great. Addressing cap gains taxes in Maine, awesome. All those are really important things. It all leads to affordability, so I'm glad they're talking about it. And I will, to dovetail off what Emily just said, it is a huge, huge accomplishment for anyone to get 2,000 signatures. Organization, doing it, it really shows a lot of logistic wherewithal. And, hats off to everybody in either party that, accomplishes that feat.
Yeah.
In 30 seconds, if you can, we've talked about MaineCare a lot. We've heard the gubernatorial candidates talk about it. It's 60% of the state budget. I mean,
yeah, it's a huge deal. I mean, that's why we take it so seriously, right? And you hear the number of people. This is a vulnerable part of our population. This speaks to our demographics in the state. It speaks to our healthcare challenges in the state. It speaks to the challenges of being able to afford health insurance, something that Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand and Republicans don't seem to get. So I think we're going to keep talking about this. This is not going away. Healthcare and how we take care of our basic needs of people who need them in our state is a conversation worth having.
Thank you. When we come back for our final block, we'll talk about ICE and the backlash against the federal agency. Democrats in Maine and across the country fear the Trump administration might interfere in the midterm elections, possibly using Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, agents to do so. Secretary of State Shenna Bellows, who's also running for governor, in a national conference call this week with chief election officers, told me she is not reassured the administration won't interfere with midterm elections this fall. And she said this.
Federal agencies told the states that ICE would not be deployed at polling places in the fall. That's good news because that's federal law. That would be completely unlawful and unconstitutional should the answer be anything different.
But the next day, the Washington Post reported Trump is considering a 17-page emergency executive order citing alleged Chinese interference in the 2020 election, of which there's no evidence, mandating photo ID, hand-counting ballots, and banning mail-in ballots. So, what do you think?
No, keep fear alive. Or is it all fear matters? I get confused. Well, first of all, you got Shenna Bellows out there who's a gubernatorial candidate and completely, I'm going to keep my personal opinions to myself at this point, but you got to look at it. She wants this fear. She wants you. We haven't been hearing about ICE in the last couple of weeks, okay? But you need to keep talking about ICE. You need to keep talking about the bad things so they can deflect away from the real issue, which is immigration reform, which the Democrats have failed to introduce when Biden was president and they had the majority, or with Obama was president and they had the majority. They weren't going to have real, sincere, good immigration reform because they knew it was a losing issue. ICE and fear is not a losing issue for them. So instead of addressing the root cause, they're going to keep this fear alive and get everybody all bundled up. And
is this liberal paranoia, or are you sincerely worried about interference? And by the way, maybe this relates to the Save America Act, which Trump is pushing.
Sure. So when I saw this news, I was like, wait a second, am I having flashbacks? Is it 2018? Is it 2020 with Donald Trump pushing a narrative about there's going to be election fraud? I mean, it is a tale as old as time. It is a song we've heard before, and I'm tired of hearing, quite frankly. I actually have faith in the secretaries of state across this country, Republicans and Democrats. States know how to do elections. They do them well. We have records of that, right? And it's even more that we have a playbook of Georgia being brought up again. It is literally the same old song. It is tired, and we need to focus on integrity of our elections, something we should be able to do together, and not fear-mongering around them.
Those fears of ICE election interference follow deployments in Democratic-led states like Maine. This week, 2 Portland women became the lead plaintiffs in a class action lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security, alleging threats and surveillance by ICE agents here violated their rights. 25-year-old Eleanor Hilton told me when she filmed ICE agents executing an arrest in the parking lot of the Home Depot in South Portland, agents took pictures of her car, license plate, and face.
as I got a little bit closer to where they were doing the abduction, the ICE agents approached me and said something to the effect of, I hope you know we're putting you on a domestic terrorist watch list, and if you keep coming to things like this, we're going to come to your house later and arrest you.
Now, that didn't happen. She didn't sleep at home that night. But Emily, are these, what do you think of this lawsuit?
I mean, ICE abuses are bad. This should not happen. Law enforcement should not be doing that. We should all agree that the abuses that we've seen from ICE are bad. And that is just a fact. And so I don't know where this, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know where this lawsuit's gonna go, but she has a right to be heard. She has a right to ask this question about whether or not this is okay. I'm gonna say it's not okay. It shouldn't be happening. She's peaceful, she's trying to do the right thing for her neighbors, and this should not happen. This is an abuse of ICE, and it's just another example.
So that's a First Amendment issue. What about the pending question about masks, warrants, body cameras? That's pending in Washington still with the DHS funding.
Well, hopefully the Democrats will actually, vote to approve that funding so we can actually make some of those rudimentary changes to ICE's tactics and protocols and get them the appropriate safety needs to protect them as well as every other law enforcement official out there. It's he said, she said, it's hard. This lawsuit, just to touch on that a second, I don't know. It's probably not even worthy. I don't think you can elaborate off this, which is the point of this lawsuit is to get on this show and every other news show and be able to give folks a talking point against ICE. The fact is, we've got to boil this down to the root problem here, and we haven't addressed immigration reform at the congressional level. I mean, Civics 101, the executive branch enforces laws passed in Congress. They are enforcing the laws that are on the books right now until they're appropriately changed in Congress. Congress for decades has not addressed this issue. Okay, but we have to keep the fear alive. We need the boogeyman. And yeah, ICE is wearing a mask, because they're scared of being doxing and what type of retribution they're gonna have. I mean, understandable. Is it right or wrong? I'm not here to say that. The judges will decide and Congress will decide. But at the end of the day, we have to address immigration reform. How fair is it for the millions of people around the world that actually apply legally and go through an amazing amount of bureaucracy that could be changed in order to come to this country and be part of the American experiment? That's not fair for them.
I'll come back to the abuses of ICE that we've seen play out in the last month in Maine here, in this example, in Minnesota, where we have people who died, right, who were killed by ICE. That it's not okay. We need to agree that that's not okay and take action in Congress and in our communities to keep our neighbors safe.
Do you think there's a database of protesters and people filming? There's a difference between filming and actually interfering, but that was one of the other issues in this lawsuit.
I hope not. And I hope Congress gets the answer to that question, right? Let's see our members from our delegation, all of them asking that question. When this happened in Maine, let's ask that question. Let's get that answer.
Jason?
Yeah, let's be real. Okay, since 2001, the federal government has been collecting data on all of us. Okay, they know everything. Just ask anybody, they won't speak, but it works at the NSA. That's kind of their job. It's codified. We know what's going on. In any other situation, and I'd love to talk to a law enforcement professional about this, and any other information, let's say your local police are talking with folks at a 7-Eleven, and someone comes and tries to interfere with that conversation, or perhaps arrest, and they're videotaping and taping. Is that obstruction of justice? Do local police have a right to actually take that person's photo and name and say, hey, listen, you can't do this. This is not right. Okay? If you just take ICE out of the equation and apply it to any other law enforcement activity, what would the outcome be?
Do you think that's a domestic terrorist act?
I don't know, but I think it's worth the challenge. I think it's worth the debate on this, are we just making a separate rules for ICE in order to support illegal immigrants? And let's talk about, you said something about the outcomes and defending this person in this lawsuit. Let's talk about the victims of horrific violent acts committed by illegal immigrants. Let's talk about everybody who's here illegally. They have committed a crime. They're here illegally. They are criminals. Period.
We have consistently agreed on the criminals not being who we want to support here. We are in disagreement about the abuses of ICE and the fear-mongering of ICE.
We're out of time. I should say that DHS told us that there is no terrorism database and its agents do follow the Constitution. That's all for this week on Political Brew. Thank you to Emily and Jason, and thank you for watching.